The morning sun cast long shadows across Kensington Palace as Prince William walked slowly down the marble corridor. His footsteps echoed in the quiet hallway, each step heavier than the last. Catherine had been unusually quiet at breakfast, picking at her toast while staring out the window. Something was troubling her deeply, but she hadn't shared what was on her mind. William paused outside the oak door of their private study. He could hear muffled voices inside. Catherine's gentle tone mixed with someone else's voice he couldn't quite identify. His hand hesitated on the brass doorknob. In their years of marriage, he had learned to read his wife's moods like pages in a favorite book. Today, something felt different. There was a weight in the air that made his chest tighten with worry. The conversation inside grew quieter, almost to whispers. William's protective instincts kicked in. As future king, he was used to handling crises. But when it came to his family's private moments, he always approached with care. He knocked gently, but there was no immediate response. The whispers stopped completely. "Catherine," he called softly through the door. "May I come in?" There was a pause that seemed to stretch forever. Finally, he heard Catherine's voice, though it sounded strained and unlike her usual warm tone. "Please, William. We need to talk." His heart began to race. In all their years together, through every challenge they had faced as a couple and as members of the royal family, Catherine had never sounded quite like this. There was something broken in her voice, something that made him feel like the ground beneath his feet had shifted. William turned the handle and slowly pushed open the door. The afternoon light streaming through the tall windows created a golden glow in the room, but the atmosphere felt heavy and somber. What he saw made him freeze in the doorway, his breath catching in his throat. Catherine sat in her favorite armchair near the fireplace, her usually perfect posture crumpled as she leaned forward with her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook slightly, and William could see tears dropping between her fingers onto the Persian rug below. Across from her sat Dr. Sarah Mitchell, their trusted family physician, holding a manila folder in her lap. The doctor's expression was grave, her professional composure barely masking what appeared to be her own emotional struggle. The sight of his strong, resilient wife in such distress sent a jolt of panic through William's chest. Catherine, who had stood by his side through every royal obligation, every public scrutiny, every family drama with such grace and strength, looked utterly devastated. Whatever news Dr. Mitchell had brought, it had shattered something fundamental in the woman he loved more than life itself. "What's happened?" William asked, his voice barely above a whisper as he stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. The click of the latch seemed unusually loud in the tense silence. Dr. Mitchell looked up at him with sympathy in her eyes. She had been treating the royal family for nearly a decade and had delivered news both joyful and difficult, but William had never seen her look quite so heartbroken herself. "Your Royal Highness," she began formally, then caught herself. "William, please sit down." But William couldn't move. His feet felt rooted to the spot as his mind raced through possibilities. Was it one of the children? Had something happened to George, Charlotte, or Louis? His eyes darted between Catherine and the doctor, searching for clues in their expressions. Catherine finally looked up at him, and the sight of her tear-streaked face nearly brought him to his knees. Her usually bright eyes were red and swollen, and there was a devastation there that he had never seen before, not even during their most difficult times. "The test came back," Catherine said, her voice cracking on each word. "The ones from last week, after I felt those lumps." William's world tilted. The lumps she had found during a routine self-examination. They had both tried to stay optimistic, telling themselves it was probably nothing, just stress or hormonal changes. They had agreed not to worry the children until they knew more. But the way Catherine was looking at him now told him everything he needed to know, even before the words were spoken. "It's cancer, William," Dr. Mitchell said gently, her professional training helping her deliver the devastating news with as much compassion as possible. "The biopsy confirmed it. Catherine has breast cancer." The words hit William like a physical blow. He gripped the back of the nearest chair, his knuckles turning white as he struggled to process what he had just heard. Cancer. The word echoed in his mind, bringing with it a flood of memories he had tried to bury. Memories of his mother's struggles, of watching someone he loved battle an illness that seemed insurmountable. Catherine was watching him carefully, and despite her own pain, William could see her concern for him in her eyes. Even in her darkest moment, she was worried about how he would handle this news. It was so typically Catherine, always putting others first, always the caregiver even when she was the one who needed care. "How bad is it?" William managed to ask, his voice hoarse with emotion. Dr. Mitchell opened the folder in her lap and pulled out several papers covered with medical terminology and test results. We caught it early, which is very good news. It's stage 2, which means it hasn't spread beyond the breast tissue. But it is aggressive, and we'll need to begin treatment immediately. William finally moved, crossing the room in 3 quick strides to kneel beside Catherine's chair. He took her hands in his, feeling how cold and trembling they were. She leaned into him immediately, and he wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo while trying to stop his own hands from shaking. "We'll get through this," he whispered into her hair. "Whatever it takes, we'll get through this together." But even as he spoke the words, William felt a terror unlike anything he had ever experienced. He had lost his mother when he was young, and the thought of losing Catherine, of their children losing their mother, was almost unbearable. He tightened his arms around her, as if he could protect her from this invisible enemy through sheer force of will. Dr. Mitchell cleared her throat gently. "There are treatment options, and the prognosis is quite hopeful given the early detection. But we need to discuss the next steps as soon as possible. Time is crucial with this type of cancer." Catherine pulled back slightly to look at William, her eyes still glistening with tears but showing a spark of the determination he knew and loved. "I want to fight this, William. For you, for the children, for us. But I'm scared." William cupped her face in his hands, using his thumbs to gently wipe away her tears. "You're the strongest person I know, Catherine. And you won't be fighting alone. We have the best medical team in the world, and we have each other. That has to count for something." The afternoon sun had shifted, casting different shadows across the room, but the 3 of them remained frozen in this moment that would forever divide their lives into before and after. Before Catherine's diagnosis, when their biggest worry was the next royal engagement or whether George had finished his homework. After, when every day would be measured against the backdrop of this battle they hadn't chosen but would face together. Dr. Mitchell began explaining the treatment protocol: chemotherapy, possibly surgery, radiation therapy. The words washed over William like waves, each medical term feeling foreign and frightening. But through it all, he kept his focus on Catherine, watching her face as she absorbed the information with the same careful attention she brought to everything important in their lives. The days following Dr. Mitchell's visit blurred together in a haze of medical appointments, second opinions, and hushed conversations behind closed doors. William had immediately cleared his calendar, much to the confusion of his staff, who were used to his unwavering commitment to royal duties. But nothing mattered now except Catherine and their family. They had decided to tell the children together, but finding the right words felt impossible. How do you explain to a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 5-year-old that their mother has cancer without terrifying them? How do you maintain hope while being honest about the challenges ahead? William found himself lying awake at night, listening to Catherine's breathing beside him, counting each inhale and exhale as if he could somehow will her healthy through sheer vigilance. She often pretended to be asleep, but he could tell from the tension in her body that she was just as wakeful, just as scared. 3 days after the diagnosis, they gathered the children in the sitting room where they had shared so many happy family moments. George sat cross-legged on the carpet, building something elaborate with his blocks. Charlotte curled up beside Catherine on the sofa, always seeking physical closeness with her mother. Louis bounced between them all, his boundless 5-year-old energy a stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere his parents were trying to hide. "Children, we need to have an important family talk," Catherine began, her voice steady despite the storm William knew was raging inside her. George looked up from his blocks, immediately sensing the seriousness in his mother's tone. Charlotte snuggled closer to Catherine, her intuitive nature picking up on the undercurrents of emotion in the room. Louis stopped bouncing and climbed into William's lap, suddenly, seeking comfort without understanding why. "Mummy has been to see some doctors recently," William continued, his hand resting protectively on Catherine's shoulder. "And they've discovered that she has something called cancer. It's a sickness that we're going to work very hard to make better." The word cancer hung in the air like a dark cloud. George's face went very serious, and William could see him processing the information with the careful intelligence that sometimes made him seem older than his years. Charlotte's eyes immediately filled with tears, though she didn't fully understand what cancer meant. She understood it was something that made her parents worried. "Is Mummy going to die?" George asked with the direct honesty that only children possess. The question hit both William and Catherine like a physical blow. Catherine's breath caught, and William felt his chest tighten painfully. But this was exactly the kind of question they had prepared for, even though hearing it from their eldest son made it infinitely more heartbreaking. The doctors are very good at treating this type of sickness, Catherine said, pulling Charlotte closer while reaching for George's hand. I'm going to have medicine that will help fight the cancer, and it might make me feel tired sometimes, but we're going to do everything we can to make me healthy again. Louis, not fully grasping the conversation but sensing the emotions around him, wrapped his small arms around William's neck. "Daddy sad?" he asked in his sweet, small voice. William's eyes filled with tears he had been holding back for days. "Daddy's worried about Mummy," he admitted, knowing that honesty, tempered with hope, was the best approach with their children. "But we're going to take very good care of her." Charlotte suddenly burst into tears, the kind of deep, body-shaking sobs that broke every parent's heart. "I don't want Mummy to be sick," she cried, burying her face against Catherine's shoulder. Catherine held her daughter tightly, her own tears flowing freely now. "I know, sweetheart. I don't want to be sick either. But sometimes these things happen, and what's important is that we face them together as a family." George abandoned his blocks and climbed onto the sofa beside them, creating a family huddle that somehow felt both heartbreaking and healing. Even Louis seemed to understand that this was a moment for closeness, settling more quietly in William's arms. "Will your hair fall out like Mrs. Henderson's did?" George asked, remembering a family friend who had battled cancer the year before. Catherine nodded honestly. "It might. The medicine that fights cancer sometimes makes people's hair fall out temporarily, but it grows back." "I'll still think you're beautiful, Mummy," Charlotte said fiercely, her tear-streaked face showing a determination that reminded William so much of Catherine herself. "Me too," George added solemnly. "Hair doesn't matter." William felt his heart break and heal simultaneously at their children's responses. Despite their fear and confusion, they were showing the same grace and strength that he had fallen in love with in their mother. That evening, after the children were finally asleep, a process that took much longer than usual as each of them seemed reluctant to leave their parents' sides, William and Catherine sat in their private sitting room, holding hands and processing the emotional weight of the day. "They handled it better than I expected," Catherine said softly, her head resting against William's shoulder. "They're incredible children," William replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "They get that from you." Catherine was quiet for a long moment before speaking again. "William, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." He shifted so he could look at her face, concerned by the serious tone in her voice. "Anything. Are you staying with me because it's your duty? Because of the children? Or because of what people would expect of a husband in this situation?" The question stunned him. "Catherine, how can you even ask that?" "Because I need to know that if you're going to be here, if you're going to fight this with me, it's because you want to be here, not because you feel obligated." William took her face in his hands, looking directly into her eyes with an intensity that made his feelings unmistakable. "Catherine Elizabeth, I am here because I cannot imagine being anywhere else. I am here because you are my heart, my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. I am here because the thought of facing any of this without you is unbearable. Not because it's my duty, but because it's my choice. It's the only choice." Fresh tears spilled down Catherine's cheeks, but this time they seemed to carry some relief along with the fear. "I love you so much, William. And I'm terrified." "I'm terrified too," he admitted, pulling her close. "But we're going to be terrified together, and we're going to fight together, and we're going to get through this together." As they held each other in the quiet of their sitting room, with their children sleeping safely upstairs and the weight of their new reality settling around them, William made a silent promise. He would be her strength when she felt weak, her hope when she felt despair, and her anchor when the storm of treatment threatened to sweep her away. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with challenges they couldn't yet imagine. But they would face it as they had faced everything else in their marriage, hand in hand, heart to heart, and with an unshakable commitment to each other and their family. Tomorrow would bring the first oncology appointment, the beginning of a treatment plan that would test every aspect of their strength and resilience. But tonight, they simply held each other and drew strength from the love that had brought them together and would see them through whatever lay ahead. The private wing of London's most exclusive cancer treatment center felt worlds away from the public eye, but William knew that wouldn't last forever. Eventually, They would have to make some kind of public announcement about Catherine's condition. For now, though, they were grateful for the privacy that allowed them to focus entirely on her treatment without the added pressure of public scrutiny. Dr. Elizabeth Chambers, the renowned oncologist who had agreed to oversee Catherine's care, was everything they could have hoped for: brilliant, compassionate, and experienced in treating patients who live their lives under intense public pressure. She understood the unique challenges that came with being a member of the royal family while fighting cancer. The good news is that we have several treatment options, Dr. Chambers explained as she spread Catherine's test results across her desk. Given your age, overall health, and the specific type and stage of cancer we're dealing with, I'm optimistic about the prognosis. Catherine sat forward in her chair, her notebook ready as she had prepared a list of questions that filled 2 pages. William admired her methodical approach, even in the face of such overwhelming circumstances. She had always been thorough and organized, qualities that would serve her well in the months ahead. What exactly does the treatment involve? Catherine asked, her pen poised to take notes. We'll start with chemotherapy to shrink the tumor before surgery. The chemotherapy will be administered every 3 weeks for approximately 4 to 6 cycles, depending on how well you respond. After that, we'll perform a lumpectomy to remove the remaining cancerous tissue, followed by radiation therapy to ensure we've eliminated any remaining cancer cells. William felt his stomach tighten at the clinical description of what Catherine would have to endure. Chemotherapy, surgery, radiation. Each word represented weeks or months of treatment that would challenge every aspect of their lives. What are the side effects we should expect? William asked, taking Catherine's free hand in his. Dr. Chambers's expression grew more serious. Chemotherapy affects people differently, but common side effects include fatigue, nausea, hair loss, and increased susceptibility to infections. We have excellent medications to help manage the nausea, and we'll monitor your blood counts carefully to watch for any signs of complications. Catherine wrote steadily in her notebook, but William could see her hand trembling slightly. The reality of what lay ahead was becoming more concrete with each detail Dr. Chambers provided. When would we start? Catherine asked. As soon as possible. I'd like to begin your first chemotherapy session next week if you're ready. The word ready seemed almost laughable to William. How could anyone be ready for something like this? But he knew what Dr. Chambers meant. The sooner they began treatment, the better Catherine's chances of a complete recovery. After the appointment, they drove home in relative silence, both lost in their own thoughts about what they had just learned. The treatment schedule would dominate their lives for the next 6 to 8 months. Every 3rd week, Catherine would spend hours at the treatment center, connected to 4 lines that would pump powerful drugs through her system to fight the cancer. I keep thinking about the children, Catherine said as they approached Kensington Palace. How do we maintain any sense of normalcy for them when our entire world is about to change? William had been wondering the same thing. George, Charlotte, and Louis needed stability and routine, especially during such an uncertain time. But Catherine's treatment schedule would inevitably disrupt many of their usual family activities. We'll figure it out, William said, though he wasn't sure how. Maybe we can arrange for the children to visit you during some of the shorter treatment sessions. Let them see that the hospital isn't a scary place. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. I like that idea. I don't want them to feel shut out of what's happening. That evening, as they tucked the children into bed, William marveled at how normal everything seemed on the surface. Louis insisted on his usual 3 bedtime stories. Charlotte wanted her hair braided just so, and George was excited to tell them about a science project he was planning. For brief moments, it was easy to forget about the storm clouds gathering on their horizon. But later, as William found Catherine standing in their bathroom, staring at herself in the mirror, the weight of their new reality came crashing back. I keep looking at my hair, she said softly, running her fingers through the honey-colored strands that had become her signature look. Wondering how long I have before it's all gone. William stepped behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. You know what Charlotte said today? Hair doesn't matter. I know that logically, Catherine replied, leaning back against his chest. But it's not just about vanity. It's about control, I think. Cancer is taking away so many choices, and losing my hair will make it impossible to hide what I'm going through. William wrapped his arms around her waist, holding her close as they both stared at their reflection. We'll get you the most beautiful wigs money can buy, or scarves, or hats, whatever makes you feel like yourself. Promise me something, Catherine said, turning in his arms to face him directly. Anything. Promise me that you'll tell me if this gets too hard for you. If watching me go through this becomes too difficult, if you need a break, if you need help, promise you'll tell me. William cupped her face gently, seeing the worry in her eyes that went beyond her own health. She was concerned about him, about how he would handle watching her suffer through treatment. It was so typical of Catherine to worry about everyone else even when she was the one facing the greatest challenge. Catherine, I promise you that I will always be honest with you about how I'm feeling. But I also promise you that there is nowhere else I would rather be than right here, fighting this with you. You're not getting rid of me. The next morning brought their first real test. Catherine woke up feeling nauseated, not from treatment, which hadn't started yet, but from anxiety about what lay ahead. She tried to hide it from the children during breakfast, but William could see the effort it took for her to maintain her usual cheerful demeanor as she helped them get ready for school. After they dropped the children off, Catherine had a moment of panic in the car. What if I can't do this, William? What if I'm not strong enough for chemotherapy and surgery and months of feeling sick? William pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face her. Do you remember when George was born and you were in labor for 18 hours? Catherine nodded, though she looked puzzled about where he was going with this. Do you remember what you said to me when you thought you couldn't push anymore? I said I couldn't do it. And what did I tell you? A small smile crossed Catherine's face. You told me I was already doing it. You're already doing this, Catherine. From the moment you found those lumps and decided to get them checked, you've been fighting. Every doctor's appointment, every difficult conversation with the children, every night you've stayed awake worrying about the future, you've been showing incredible strength. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but they seemed different from the tears of the past few days. These carried a hint of determination along with the fear. I can do this, she said, more to herself than to him. You can do this, William confirmed. And I'll be right there with you every step of the way. As they drove toward home, William felt a shift in the atmosphere between them. The fear and uncertainty were still there, but they were beginning to be balanced by something else, a quiet resolve, a determination to face whatever came next with courage and grace. The first chemotherapy session was scheduled for the following Thursday. They had decided to tell the palace staff about Catherine's diagnosis that afternoon, swearing them to secrecy until they were ready to make a public announcement. The logistics of maintaining Catherine's treatment schedule while managing their royal duties would be complicated, but William was confident they could make it work. Most importantly, they were facing this challenge united, with a clear treatment plan and the best medical team available. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time since Dr. Mitchell had delivered the devastating news, William felt something like hope beginning to take root alongside the fear. The first chemotherapy session arrived with the gray drizzle of a typical London morning. William had barely slept the night before, his mind racing through every possible scenario of how Catherine might react to the treatment. She had been quiet during breakfast, picking at her toast while the children chattered excitedly about their plans for the day, blissfully unaware that their mother was about to begin the fight of her life. They had arranged for William's father, King Charles, to spend the afternoon with George, Charlotte, and Louis. Despite the complicated relationship William sometimes had with his father, he was grateful for the support during this crucial time. The children adored their grandfather, and his presence would provide a welcome distraction from their parents' absence. The Cancer Treatment Center felt different on this Thursday morning compared to their previous visits. Before, it had been about consultations and planning. Today, it was real. Today, Catherine would receive the first dose of chemicals designed to save her life, while potentially making her feel worse than she had ever felt before. Dr. Chambers greeted them personally, a gesture William knew was not standard practice but reflected the extraordinary circumstances of their situation. As members of the royal family, their treatment required additional privacy measures and security considerations that most patients never had to worry about. How are you feeling this morning, Catherine? Dr. Chambers asked as she reviewed Catherine's latest blood test results. Nervous, Catherine admitted honestly, but ready to begin. The treatment room was surprisingly comfortable, more like a cozy living room than a medical facility. Soft lighting, comfortable recliners, and peaceful artwork on the walls created an atmosphere designed to reduce anxiety. But William still felt his chest tighten as he watched Catherine settle into the treatment chair. Nurse Jennifer, who would be administering the chemotherapy, had a warm, reassuring manner that immediately put them both at ease. She had been working with cancer patients for over 15 years and had a gift for making the most frightening treatments feel manageable. We'll start with some anti-nausea medication, Nurse Jennifer explained as she prepared the foreline. This will help prevent some of the side effects before they start. Then, we'll begin with the first chemotherapy drug. The whole session will take about 3 hours. 3 hours. William settled into the chair beside Catherine's recliner, taking her hand as Nurse Jennifer skillfully inserted the four. Catherine barely flinched, though he could see the tension in her shoulders. I brought books, William said, gesturing to the bag beside his chair. And music. And that terrible magazine you love that I pretend to disapprove of. Catherine laughed, the first genuine laugh he had heard from her in days. You mean the one you secretly read when you think I'm not looking? I have no idea what you're talking about, William replied with mock seriousness, earning another smile from his wife. As the first medications began flowing into Catherine's system, they tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. William read aloud from a novel they had both been enjoying, occasionally pausing when Catherine felt too tired to concentrate. She dozed fitfully, waking periodically to squeeze his hand or ask for water. About halfway through the session, Catherine suddenly gripped his hand tightly, her face going pale. I feel sick, she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. Nurse Jennifer was there immediately, adjusting medications and bringing a basin. This is completely normal, she assured them both. The anti-nausea medication should help, but some people still experience discomfort during their first session. William felt helpless as he watched Catherine struggle with waves of nausea, her usual composure cracking under the physical stress of the treatment. He rubbed her back gently and whispered words of encouragement, but inside he was raging against the unfairness of watching the strongest person he knew be brought low by the very treatment meant to save her life. I'm sorry, Catherine said weakly after the nausea passed. For what? William asked, genuinely confused. For being so weak. For not handling this better. William's heart broke at the self-reproach in her voice. Catherine, you're receiving some of the strongest medications known to medical science. The fact that you're sitting here having a conversation with me is remarkable. You're not weak, you're extraordinary. The remainder of the session passed more smoothly, though William could see the treatment was taking its toll. By the time they disconnected the four, Catherine looked exhausted in a way he had never seen before. It wasn't just physical tiredness. There was something deeper, as if the cancer treatment had drained some essential energy from her spirit. How do you feel? Dr. Chambers asked as she checked Catherine's vital signs one final time. Different, Catherine said honestly. Like something fundamental has changed. Dr. Chambers nodded understandingly. That's a very common reaction to the first treatment. Your body is adjusting to powerful medications, and it's normal to feel somewhat altered. This feeling usually improves as your body adapts to the treatment schedule. The drive home was quiet, with Catherine dozing against the window while William navigated the London traffic. Every few minutes, he glanced over to check on her, noting the pallor in her complexion and the way she held herself more carefully, as if sudden movements might bring back the nausea. When they arrived at Kensington Palace, the children were waiting eagerly to hear about their parents' day. William had prepared them that morning, explaining that Mummy might feel tired after her medicine, but their enthusiasm was undimmed. How was your treatment, Mummy? George asked with the directness that William both admired and sometimes feared. It was okay, sweetheart, Catherine said, mustering a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The doctors and nurses were very kind, and Daddy kept me company the whole time. Charlotte studied her mother's face with the intuitive perception that seemed beyond her years. Are you feeling sick from the medicine? A little bit, Catherine admitted. But that means the medicine is working to fight the cancer. Louis, who had been building an elaborate tower with his blocks, abandoned his project to climb into Catherine's lap. Mummy needs hugs, he announced solemnly, wrapping his small arms around her neck. William watched Catherine hold their youngest son, seeing how much effort it took for her to maintain the gentle patience she always showed with their children. The treatment had clearly drained her more than she was letting on, but she was determined not to let the children see how much she was struggling. That evening, after the children were finally settled in bed, Catherine's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. The nausea returned with a vengeance, leaving her retching and exhausted while William held her hair back and whispered reassurances he wasn't sure he believed himself. Is it going to be like this every time? Catherine asked weakly as she leaned against him on their bathroom floor. I don't know, William admitted, hating that he couldn't give her a more comforting answer. But we'll get through it. Each time, we'll get through it together. As they finally made their way to bed, Catherine moving slowly and carefully, William realized that the first treatment had marked the beginning of a new phase in their lives. The initial shock of the diagnosis was behind them, replaced by the grinding reality of treatment that would continue for months. But despite the physical and emotional toll of the day, William felt something unexpected alongside the worry and exhaustion. Pride. He was incredibly proud of Catherine's courage, of the way she had faced her fear and taken the first step in fighting for her life. Proud of their children's resilience and understanding. Proud of their family's ability to support each other through the most difficult circumstances they had ever faced. The road ahead was long, with many more treatment sessions to endure and challenges they couldn't yet anticipate. But they had survived the first day, and that felt like a victory worth celebrating. Even in the midst of their ongoing battle, 6 months had passed since that first devastating conversation with Dr. Mitchell, and the private sitting room at Kensington Palace had become a sanctuary of quiet triumph. Catherine sat in her favorite armchair, the same one where she had received her diagnosis, but everything about her presence was different now. The thin silk scarf that covered her slowly growing hair couldn't hide the radiant smile on her face as Dr. Chambers delivered news they had barely dared to hope for. The latest scans show no evidence of disease, Dr. Chambers said, her professional composure giving way to genuine joy. Catherine, you're officially in complete remission. The words hung in the air like music. William felt his knees go weak with relief, and he had to grip the arm of his chair to keep from collapsing. Complete remission. After months of chemotherapy, surgery, radiation treatments, and countless difficult days, Catherine had won her battle against cancer. Catherine's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks, but these were tears of pure joy rather than the fear and anguish that had marked the beginning of their journey. Really? She whispered through her fingers. It's really gone. The treatments have been completely successful, Dr. Chambers confirmed. Your body has responded beautifully to every phase of treatment. The surgery removed all traces of the tumor, and the follow-up radiation eliminated any remaining cancer cells. Your latest blood work and imaging studies are absolutely clear. William crossed to Catherine's chair and pulled her into his arms, both of them crying and laughing simultaneously. The relief was overwhelming, almost too much to comprehend after months of living with the constant undercurrent of fear. They had won. Catherine had fought cancer and emerged victorious. What happens now? William asked when they had composed themselves enough to continue the conversation. We'll continue monitoring Catherine with regular checkups and scans, Dr. Chambers explained. The 5-year survival rate for someone in Catherine's situation, caught as early as we caught it and responding as well as she has, is over 95%. You have every reason to be optimistic about the future. The future. For months, they had lived day by day, treatment by treatment, never allowing themselves to plan too far ahead. The possibility of a normal future had seemed like a luxury they couldn't afford to contemplate. Now, suddenly, it was real again. After Dr. Chambers left, William and Catherine sat together in the afternoon sunlight streaming through their windows, holding hands and trying to absorb the magnitude of what they had just learned. The battle that had consumed their lives for half a year was finally over. I want to tell the children, Catherine said, her voice stronger than it had sounded in months. They're going to be so happy, William replied, thinking of how mature and supportive George, Charlotte, and Louis had been throughout Catherine's treatment. They had adapted to their mother's changing energy levels, learned to be gentle when she felt sick, and celebrated small victories like good blood test results with the pure enthusiasm that only children could bring to difficult situations. When they gathered the children that evening, the contrast to their first family meeting about the cancer was striking. Instead of fear and uncertainty, the room was filled with anticipation and hope. Catherine looked healthier than she had in months, her energy restored and her smile genuine. Do you remember when we told you that Mummy was sick with cancer? William began, watching as all 3 children nodded seriously. Well, today we went to see Dr. Chambers, and she told us that all of Mummy's treatments worked perfectly, Catherine continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. The cancer is completely gone. The children's reactions were immediate and unrestrained. George whooped with joy and jumped up to hug his mother. Charlotte burst into happy tears, clinging to Catherine with the fierce relief that only someone who had worried deeply could feel. Louis, who had never fully understood the gravity of the situation but had sensed his family's stress, simply grinned widely and announced, Mummy, all better. Does this mean you won't have to go to the hospital anymore? Charlotte asked, her face pressed against Catherine's shoulder. I'll still need to visit the doctors sometimes, just to make sure I stay healthy, Catherine explained. But no more chemotherapy, no more feeling sick from medicine. I'm going to get stronger every day. George, ever the thoughtful one, looked between his parents with a maturity that sometimes took William by surprise. Were you very scared, Mummy? Catherine considered the question seriously, never believing in talking down to her children. Yes, I was very scared sometimes. But you know what helped me the most? What? All three children asked in unison. Knowing that I had Daddy and all of you to love and support me. And knowing that I was fighting not just for myself, but for all the wonderful things we still want to do together as a family. That evening, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into quiet, William found Catherine standing in their garden, looking up at the stars. The cool night air carried the scent of late-blooming roses, and, for the first time in months, the atmosphere felt completely peaceful. What are you thinking about? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Everything, Catherine said softly. How different this moment feels from 6 months ago. How grateful I am. How much I love our life together. William rested his chin on her shoulder, following her gaze to the star-filled sky. Do you remember what you asked me that first night, about whether I was staying because of duty? Catherine leaned back against his chest. I remember. I want you to know that these past months have only confirmed what I told you then. Watching you fight this battle, seeing your courage and strength even on the hardest days, being part of your recovery. It's been the privilege of my life. Not because I had to be there, but because I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. Catherine turned in his arms, her eyes bright with tears in the moonlight. I couldn't have done it without you, William. On the days when I wanted to give up, when I felt too sick to continue, when I was afraid the treatment wasn't working, you were my anchor. You kept me grounded and hopeful. They stood together in their garden, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of the London night, both acutely aware of how precious this moment was. 6 months ago, they hadn't known if they would have moments like this again. The diagnosis had thrown their entire future into question, making every day uncertain and every plan conditional. Now, with Catherine's remission confirmed, they could begin to dream again. Dream about watching their children grow up, about growing old together, about all the ordinary and extraordinary moments that make up a shared life. What do you want to do first? William asked. Now that we can start planning for the future again. Catherine smiled, the radiant smile that had first captured his heart years ago and had somehow grown even more beautiful through their recent trials. I want to take the children on that holiday we talked about last summer. I want to feel strong enough to play with them on the beach, to swim in the ocean, to stay up late talking and laughing without worrying about treatment schedules. That sounds perfect, William agreed. And after that, I want to return to my royal duties gradually, but I also want to spend time supporting other families going through cancer treatment. I want to use our experience to help others who are facing what we just went through. William wasn't surprised by Catherine's desire to turn their ordeal into something that could benefit others. Throughout her treatment, even on her worst days, she had been thinking about how their experience might help other families facing similar battles. Her compassion and sense of service had never wavered, even when she was the one who needed care and support. The world is going to be so happy to know you're healthy, William said, thinking about the inevitable public announcement they would need to make about Catherine's recovery. I'm ready for that now, Catherine replied. I'm ready to share our story, the difficult parts and the triumphant parts. If our experience can give hope to even one family facing cancer, then all of this will have had additional meaning. As they finally made their way back inside, William reflected on how profoundly the past 6 months had changed them. They had always been close, always been a strong team, but facing cancer together had deepened their bond in ways he was still discovering. They had seen each other at their most vulnerable, most frightened, most exhausted, and their love had not only survived but grown stronger. Catherine was officially cancer-free, but more than that, she was radiant with life, purpose, and gratitude. Their family had been tested by the greatest challenge they could imagine, and they had emerged not just intact but more unified than ever. The future stretched ahead of them now, bright with possibility and rich with the appreciation that only comes from nearly losing something precious. They would face whatever came next together, strengthened by the knowledge that their love could withstand anything and that hope, even in the darkest moments, had the power to sustain and ultimately triumph.